Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. The issue of MDC, Triple C, failed the nation is not going away. Nelson Chamisa has chipped in himself and said, I'm an open book. I have nothing to hide. I've lived narrow and straight. I seek peace, not war. I speak love, not hate. The future is happiness. Well, that's all very well. But that does not explain why is it that MDC, Triple C have failed to implement even one token reform in 24 years, 5 of which in the GNU. The reason why Emmerson Mnangagwa and his Zanu-PF thugs were able to blatantly rig last year's elections is because we have not implemented even one token reform. This is the number one task that the people of Zimbabwe elected the MDC. The party name itself was Movement for Democratic Change. What change have you brought in the last 24 years, including 5 in the GNU? That is at the heart of the matter. His lawyer has chipped in, Advocate Thabani Mpofu, making the usual threats. You can't go on like this. If anyone has evidence on Chamisa, i.e., that he was bribed, let them produce it or forever hold their peace. I think Advocate Mpofu should know that Nelson Chamisa and his fellow Triple C guys are public officials. They were elected by the people of Zimbabwe into public office and are therefore accountable to the people of Zimbabwe. For the people to turn around and say, you've not implemented any reforms, and looking at the evidence that is there, 24 years and not even a one token reform implemented, one has to demand an explanation. Advocate Chamisa claims that he has got nothing to hide. I've lived narrow and straight. Well, that is not true, is it? Advocate Chamisa, former president of Triple C, he is a liar. That we cannot pretend is not true. How many times has he stood up and made promises to the people of Zimbabwe? Last year, he is the one who conned people to participate in those elections, telling them that we don't need reforms. We don't need to implement even one token reform because I have plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. Zanu-PF will not be able to rig the elections. People believed him. Millions of Zimbabweans believed him. they participated in last year's elections, confident that Triple C was going to win big. This is him telling the people that they should prepare. He is preparing, rather, for his cabinet because he was so confident he was going to win.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan yaMwari haifoiri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
Well, he was lying. In his promise, he even invoked the name of God. Hashtag God is in it. God was not in his harebrained scheme of participating in flawed elections. He wasn't. What is annoying here, particularly, is that Chamisa and company knew these elections were flawed. They knew it. They've known it all along. And they participated out of greed. Pure and simple. What we are seeing here is a situation where people keep denying and pretend that they didn't know. I think that is what many people find so annoying. Here is a quotation I've often referred to. This is a quotation from one of the MDC CCC leaders, David Coulter, in his book, and he was referring here to the 2013 elections. He acknowledged that the election process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step for anyone to do was to withdraw. And yet, they all participated out of greed. This is at the heart of it. If Chamisa life is an open book, then he should tell us, why have you been participating in flawed elections out of greed? You can't keep on denying it and pretend you were not bribed, when clearly you were bribed. Coulter was not the only one who admitted that. Before that, Tendai admitted the same thing, that it was an exercise in futility to keep participating in these flawed elections. Because the process is so flawed, it's totally meaningless. And yet they keep on participating. I think what we have here is individuals who say one thing and do another and pretend that we have not noticed it. Here is a video clip where Chamisa was for once taken to task about his lying.
Ende patakasangana na Trump akatibvunza naye akomana Maria murukuda kuti nyika ifambe imari.
Serious questions were raised about your behaviour in Washington, D.C. You did see some senior people on Capitol Hill, some Congress people, but you also claimed that you'd seen Donald Trump. You claimed you had a conversation with him in which you said he asked you how much you needed to move the country forward. You told him $15 billion, and he said to you that he would provide the money if you won the election. That was not true, was it?
Sangana na Trump, akatibvunza nawe akomana.
It was not true that you'd seen Donald Trump and that Donald Trump indicated to you that he would provide, if you won the election,
but
$15 billion.
All those statements were said by other people, not what I said.
Trump,
well, no, because there is a video which shows you at a rally in January back home in Zimbabwe saying that Donald Trump had pretty much promised you $15 billion. To be clear, because some people in Zimbabwe are still confused, you're now telling me you did not meet Donald Trump.
We did not.
This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. We have leaders who are corrupt, incompetent, and they refuse to be held to account. I think what we have here is somebody who wants to pretend not to understand what bribery means. This is an interesting video clip. It's from a movie, Schindler's List. If you haven't watched it, it is a good movie, well worth watching. This is a scene in that movie in which a German commandant is bribed. Of course, he doesn't want to admit that it's a bribe. Rather calls it something else.
You are not the only industrialist who needs labor, Herr Schindler. I remember earlier this year, IG Farben ordered a trainload of Hungarians for his chemical factory. The train came in through the archway, and the officer in charge of the selection went immediately to work and sent 2,000 of them straight away to special treatment. It is not my task to interfere with the processes that take place down here. Why do you think I can help you if I can't help IG Farben?
Allow me to express the reason. I'm not making any judgment about you. It's just that I know that in the coming months, we're all going to need portable wealth.
I could have you arrested.
I'm protected by powerful friends. You should know that.
I do not say I'm accepting them. All I say is I'm not comfortable with them on the table. I have a shipment coming in tomorrow. I'll cut you 300 units from it, new ones. These are fresh. The train comes, we turn it around.
Yes.
It's yours.
I understand. I want these.
You shouldn't get stuck on names. That's right. It creates a lot of paperwork.
Soldinger Ernestina, Wäldergrün Hinder, Belde Grün Leonora, Last Anna, Pfefferberg Miller, Dresdner Ruth, Dresdner Danka, Nussbaum Sidomia, Rosner Manchi, Hirsch Helen, Großchaya Sarah, Seelenfreund Estera.
This is the reality. Was the MDC leaders bribed by Robert Mugabe with the trappings of high office, for instance, the ministerial limos, the very generous salaries, and for Morgan Changirai himself, the $4 million mansion in Highlands? That is at the heart of our problem here. Did they get those bribes and then they forgot about the reforms? As much as Chamisa and company would try to deny that they were bribed, the reality is they did not implement even one token reform during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so. As much as Chamisa will claim that he's an open book with nothing to hide, and he has followed the narrow and the straight, he cannot deny that he was a senior member of the MDC during the GNU. He was a minister, for Pete's sake. And for somebody who was leave the narrow and straight, when it came to implementing reforms, he joined the others. He did not submit even one reform proposal in 5 years. For somebody who claimed that he has lived the narrow and straight, he cannot deny that he lied to the people last year to entice them to participate in a flawed election, which he knew was flawed. He knew that by participating, you're only giving Zanu-PF legitimacy. But he and his friends also knew that by participating, they will get a few gravy train seats. The truth of the matter is, ever since MDC leaders got into power, particularly since the GNU, they've done absolutely nothing to implement reforms. Their number one priority is to keep their position, their pole position as Zimbabwe's main opposition party, ready to take over from Zanu-PF. They didn't want to rock the boat. They didn't want to put their lives at risk and annoy Zanu-PF. They're expecting the ordinary people to get so desperate for change that they will either go on the street and they have protests, and at the end of it, with Zanu-PF forced out of office, Chamisa and company will claim the prize. They're hoping that if street protests do not work, there will be another military coup. Only this time, they're hoping that they will not be shortchanged, as happened in 2017. In 2017, they endorsed the military coup on the promise they will go into a GNU and they will have a share of in the GNU, a share of the seats, share of the power, only for Zanu-PF to change the goalpost and claim that the military coup was a Zanu-PF affair and they have no share in it. This is the reality for a political system. As much as Chamisa would want to claim that the opposition is not corrupt, that the opposition was not bought by Zanu-PF, I think he knows that the opposition is in Zanu-PF's deep pockets. In November 2022, his MDC friends who were in parliament accepted the US $40,000 housing loan, knowing fully well that they were not expected to pay back that loan. It was a bribe. They accepted it. Even he himself tried to warn them that they should not accept it. And I think they gave him the middle finger. They participated in last year's elections, knowing fully well the process was flawed. And even after SADC had condemned the process as flawed, MDC leaders who had won the seats, including the likes of Advocate Bazai Mahere, David Coulthard, they went on to accept their Gravitran seats, arguing that in those areas where CCC had won, those are liberated zones. Of course, that was nonsense. MDC, CCC knew that the voters' roll, for instance, was in shambles. How can you have a free, fair, and credible election when you don't even have a verified voters' roll? Even when SADC and the AU had condemned those elections as flawed, they went ahead and accepted their Gravitran seats out of grid. As much as many people, many Zimbabweans have been critical of SADC, saying why did they condemn the election and yet did not do anything to deny Zanu-PF legitimacy. I think SADC had a very difficult decision to make. If Zimbabweans participated in the elections in their millions, knowing fully well that the election was flawed, in their millions, is it really for an outsider to tell them that they should not have participated? I think we need to grow up as a nation and take responsibility for what has happened here. SADC was the ones who forced Robert Mugabe and Zanu-PF to sign the 2008 Global Political Agreement that gave birth to the GNU. And credit where credit is due. SADC did try to get MDC leaders to implement the reforms during the GNU. Notably, South Africa's Minister Lindiwe Zulu. It is no secret that she had sat down with Morgan Tsvangirai and the rest, Chamisa and company, advising them that they need to implement the reforms. And to the annoyance of everyone, they would go and tell Zanu-PF that. And hence, on one occasion, Robert Mugabe had the audacity of calling Lindiwe Zulu street woman for interfering in Zimbabwe's internal affairs. We cannot deny that MDC, CCC have failed to implement even one token reform in 25 years, including 5 in the GNU. And they've been participating in flawed elections, knowing fully well that they are flawed, knowing fully well that by participating they were giving Zanu-PF legitimacy. And then somebody turns around and say, I'm clean. I'm an open book. I think that is the kind of disrespect, to say the least, an insult to the people of Zimbabwe, who have risked lives, livelihoods, and limbs to elect these people into office for the primary purpose of implementing reforms and stopping Zanu-PF rigging the elections. They cannot pretend that they know nothing. I think that is just as much as, yes, the majority of ordinary Zimbabweans out there do not even know what the reforms are, much less the process of implementing the reforms. But we expect at least the people like Chamisa, leaders in leadership positions, to know what the reforms are. And to also know that they sold out. I think this debate is not going to go away. And let me make it very clear. It should not go away. Because as long as we have no reforms, and given our present political situation, it's almost certain that Chamisa and company will participate in 2028 elections without a single reform. They will con their ignorant and naive and gullible, and I must admit, desperate followers to participate on the basis of another false claim that they will win rigged elections. Yes, I accept that the people themselves have a responsibility to understand what is going on and not to be so taken advantage of. But that does not mean that politicians can do as they please. And when they are asked to account for it, they pretend that they are innocent and they should not be held to account. That I cannot accept. I would like to remind the listeners what we need to make sure we have got free, fair, and credible elections in 2028. This is Dr. Nevas Mumba, who was the chair of the SADC Election Observer Mission last year, reminding Zimbabweans what this is all about.
Said to me, Mr. Vice President, go on behalf of SADC, and all I expect from you is to help to give the Zimbabweans a free, fair, and credible election. Those are the only, he said it twice. I need nothing from you, Mr. Vice President, but free, fair, and credible election. You would have done your job. When I was in Zimbabwe, and we were on our way to go and see President Mnangagwa to pay a courtesy call on him, I contacted the president here, President Hakainde Hichilema. I said, Mr. President, we are going to see your colleague. Do you have a word for him? Any greeting, whatever? He said, no. The only thing you tell my colleague is that let's go ahead and give the Zimbabweans a free, fair, and credible election. He repeated the same words. So there was one.
That is the reality. That is what this is all about. Free, fair, and credible elections. And I think if the truth be told, it's not only Zanu-PF we've got a problem with here. It's the opposition too. We have an opposition that is determined to deny that they've sold out on reforms and they are participating in flawed elections to give Zanu-PF legitimacy. SADC have warned our friends in the opposition that these elections are flawed, and yet they will keep on participating. And they will insult us by claiming that they are an open book. The other day, Chamisa was claiming that reforms is not a sprint, it's a marathon. Yes, my friend, even a marathon has got a starting point and end point. After 24 years, 5 of which in the GNU, you have not implemented even one token reform. You're participating to give Zanu-PF legitimacy, and you want to tell us you're still in the race? You're still running in that race to deliver free, fair, and credible elections in Zimbabwe? No. You're not. And I think the people of Zimbabwe must finally wake up to the reality that the MDC, CCC, Chamisa and company will never deliver any meaningful democratic change in the country. The people themselves have got to wake up to that reality and realize that if they want to stop Zanu-PF rigging the elections, they've got to elect opposition leaders who will implement the reforms. That is all that is required here. I can tell you now that if Zimbabweans had not participated in last year's elections in their millions, SADC election observers had come up with such a damning report saying those elections were flawed, I believe SADC would have denied Zanu-PF political legitimacy. But with the situation as it was on the ground, could they realistically deny Zanu-PF political legitimacy? The answer is no. And I think this is where we should take responsibility. We have got a problem in Zimbabwe where we are easily sidelined. I know some people have been talking of, oh no, what about Savango? Well, Savango has come into the scene after the GNU. What role did Savango play in stopping MDC implementing the reforms when they had the golden opportunity to do so during the GNU? We really need to wake up to the reality that we have opposition leaders here. We have proven to be corrupt, breathtakingly corrupt, incompetent, and utterly useless. I totally subscribe to the view that Chamisa was bribed by Zanu-PF so that they would not implement any reforms. And it is this gravy train seats, bribes, that has enticed them to continue participating in flawed elections. He can deny it all he wants, but that is the truth. Thank you very much for joining me today, and have a good day.